Welcome to First Novel Problems. I'm your host, Abby Matthews, and with me today is...
I am Brooke Tannehill, the unknowledgeable beginner writer, I guess you could say.
I wouldn't say unknowledgeable. You're just
Really?
green. This is just your
Green.
first time.
Very
Yeah,
good. Yeah, I think I could take
because
that. Mm.
we're not discussing anything that you need any sort of like master's degree in creative writing in order to do. You
That's
can
true.
do this. You can learn this,
Mhm.
people. It's, you got this. And today, in particular, we're going to be talking about ideal readers because last week we wrote our jacket copy, right? Which
Mhm.
I said you need to think about that. It's a marketing piece, but if you think about it before you write, it's the promise that you're making to your reader that your book is going to deliver on. But who is that reader you're making the promise to? And
Mhm.
that is what we're discussing this week. So before we lead into it, I didn't ask you, and if the answer is no, don't worry. Do you have your jacket copy? Would you like to read it?
I would like to tweak it a little bit more before I share it, but
Okay.
I will share it with you guys beforehand. And the only reason why I say that is because I did a sprint today, which if you guys have never participated in a Dabble sprint, I recommend it. And so there's just a couple of things I think I got to iron out real fast because
Okay.
I'm still getting into it. So,
Totally fair. Totally fair. You are, as Hank would say, this is actually one of the most exciting phases in a writer's career. Okay. And we're going to call this a career because right now you don't have a deadline. So you have self-imposed deadlines, but you don't have an editor or a publisher or an audience breathing down your neck. You don't have that added pressure. So you can have another week to finish your jacket copy, Brooke.
yeah,
I'll
and
allow
you're
it.
not going to be here next week, so I've got to figure out what to do with my life. So,
I think everybody's going to survive without me. That's all I'm
we'll
saying.
see. We'll see.
Well, let's talk about that ideal reader then. Okay, so
Okay.
why are you thinking about the person who will buy your book before you write it? Well,
I would say my reason would be like because we've talked so far about delivering on promises.
mm-hmm.
And that I think is one part of it. But that kind of fits into the genre. But I also, from my perspective, which could be completely wrong, would be we would want to write something that is appealing to that audience instead of something that's going to immediately turn them off. Like if I'm
Yes.
writing a women's fiction novel, I don't want to have, and I'm making this up, I don't want, because I'm sure there's women that are like this, want to have sports memorabilia and statistics and a bunch of stuff that has nothing to do with women's fiction.
Okay, so you've kind of hit on a key piece there when you said I would want, right? Now,
Hmm.
when I ask people who their ideal reader is, oftentimes the answer that I get is I'm writing it for myself, right? Which, especially for your first book, so many of us start to write the book that we ourselves would want to read. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with being your own ideal reader if you have no desire to sell this book. But
Hmm.
if you want to sell this book to at least one person, guess what? That one person is your ideal reader. So I challenge writers when they say, yes, I am writing a book and I am my own ideal reader. I want to say, think about it some more.
Hmm.
Let's put a face on your ideal reader. Okay. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be a real person. So when I wrote my first book, I did the same exercise, and Jenny Nash had a kind of like a form that you were filling out, almost like an application, right?
Mhm.
To describe your ideal reader. Are they male? Are they female? How old are they? Like, what's their occupation? What do they do in their spare time for fun, right? And these are great questions, but if you're just making up random answers, to me, that's maybe a little less helpful than if you can actually write to a real person that you know who would enjoy your book.
Mhm.
Okay, so for instance, my mom is not my ideal reader. Is my
Right.
mom going to read my book? The answer is yes. But is my mom my ideal reader? And the answer is no. Okay, and Joanna Penn from the Creative Penn podcast, I don't know if anybody out there has listened to that, but I remember, like, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, she did this episode where she was really mad. She did this episode where she was really mad that her mom didn't like her book, but she was writing a thriller, and like her mom likes romance or something like that. So it wasn't even the type of book that her mother would pick up in the first place. So even though I'm sure her mother loved the fact that Joanna wrote it, it
Mhm.
doesn't mean that's her favorite book, okay? So I want to challenge you to start thinking about someone you know personally who may be your ideal reader. Because if you know someone who fits the profile for your ideal reader, then that is who I would suggest in your mind you write this book to. All right.
So the interesting perspective on the book I'm writing is this is actually written to my daughter. Like this whole
Okay.
point of the story and
Awesome.
everything I'm writing is for my daughter. So when I go into this, and this is actually kind of some of the questions I ran into during the sprint, is I need to outline a couple of more pieces, and probably in even the way I refer to things um, needs to be a little bit different. So, my example, there's a line that I was writing that was like, oh, I'm not expecting a Mr. Darcy, which for you and me, that makes a lot of sense. But I had to
Mm-hmm.
go do research and be like, hey, would somebody who is getting ready to turn 35 know who Mr. Darcy was? And actually, I was able to confirm that because the Keira Knightley
Mm-hmm.
movie came. Now, it breaks my heart that they don't know the actual Pride and Prejudice book that's sitting right here. But I was able to confirm that. So that is something that I feel like in it also lends to marketing, because in marketing that's
Mm-hmm.
called building a persona of like who your target
Mm-hmm.
audience is. So I feel like that's something that's already been
Yeah.
ingrained in me.
Yeah.
Um,
Very good.
so it's really awesome to hear that that's an exercise that we should go through now, because like with the example, I didn't even know that I had prepared for this. Um, it's something that's needs to be considered. So,
Right. Okay. So let me ask you a couple questions from the marketing side if you're building your persona, because maybe I'll walk back my feelings about making up an ideal reader, right? Maybe there is something to it. To me, that still leaves for a little ambiguity because you're
mhm.
building a profile for someone that then you have to go find to figure out, am I, have I put together something real, something useful, right? I prefer to pull from people I know in real life because I feel like I have a better sense of, would they know who Mr. Darcy was? Would they actually like doing X? Or would they read a book about Y? I feel like you have that person to, if you have to pull the thread on some research, you can just ask them outright,
Yes.
which is really lovely. And you can also, in the end, get them to beta read for you. And
Mhm.
I think that's super, super powerful, right? But if you're marketing and you're building a persona, is it okay to make up attributes and make up like a fake audience? Or are you pulling from real life data?
when we're doing personas in marketing, it's usually real life data, but it's not on a specific person. It's like in marketing, it's more of a summation of who that desired person would be. So, for
So it's
example,
an
one of the
amalgamation of one
yes,
audience into one person.
yes. So like you still name that persona of who that is. It's
Mm.
never a exact person, but like if they're Hispanic, if they're African American, what their like their income levels are. You have an idea of where they shop. What are some of the things they like to do for hobbies? So a lot of that's more for like purchase intent. So like that's why a
Mm-hmm.
lot of that information is in there, but that's from more of like a marketing persona.
But there's a purchase intent for your book in the end. And what I'm trying to challenge people to do is think about that from the beginning, because you can allow that to drive some of the decisions that you make while writing the book. So my sort of example of this is when I was writing my book. I'll just point to it right here instead of trying to pull a copy from
I just took it
wherever
up.
a copy may
I have
be.
your book upstairs. I have your book upstairs. I just took it
Oh, you
upstairs.
have.
Yeah, Lincoln was asking for it.
So when I was working on A Little Trouble Goes a Long Way, and to remind the audience, like this book was supposed to be like Charlotte's Web meets The Borrowers meets The Dukes of Hazzard. Now the Dukes of Hazzard is an outdated comp that kids today, this is a middle grade book written for kids between the ages of like 8 and 12, they do not know who the Dukes of Hazzard are, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we have a neighbor child who embodies Bo and Luke Duke.
I have one of those too.
This kid is hilarious. He doesn't wear shoes. He is, if he had access to a car and his mother would let him jump through the window and not open the door to get in, he would 100% do it. The idea of a car chase, totally up his alley. Like, this is the kid who rides the riding lawnmower as if it was a car, chasing people around his barnyard. So he has animals. He also has a big heart. And he gets very upset if people don't recognize it. And so this child, who was our next door neighbor, was quite literally the embodiment of the person I wrote this book for.
Mm-hmm.
I took aspects of the characters from his personality. And if I ever got stuck in a situation where I didn't know what to do next in the book, I would ask myself, what would Turner do?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I would use to drive my next decision. And it was incredibly helpful. And in the end, I think what it does is it writes a more authentic book, right?
Yes.
So here's one of the things that I learned from Jenny Nash, who she is so smart, and I will reference her probably a million times over the course of this YouTube series, right? But the more specific you can get when you create a character, the more likely it is to speak to a broader audience, because you are creating something very genuine.
And I think that is also why I'm really happy I did the sprint today, because what I did, and my daughter has a group of friends. I'm very familiar with them. And I'm pulling from this because it's the example for this book, that I know how they react to like their relationships. I know it gives them the quote unquote ick. So when I'm building out her, like the protagonist in my book's love interest, so to say, because of exactly what you're saying, I know how to write what would give her the ick in a situation, versus if it was a different person who I was considering, the icks, quote unquote, would be completely different. Like,
Mm-hmm.
my daughter does not like the bro type dude, whatever. Like, brotastic is not her jam. Um, She is more drawn to like intellectual. And so it also, I think, is great because it helps to easily set up the conflict because you would know from their personalities and what they're interested in what those real life conflicts would be because she's not going to enjoy going on a frat party style yacht trip for the weekend. That's
Mhm.
going to be a nope. So to your point, I think it's really, really important to get this established because then it's going to make those conflicts, the interactions, and even the relationships so much easier to write.
Absolutely. So that's the thing that I want everyone to think about, this week. If you're listening or watching us, it sounds like you already know who your ideal reader is. Is it
Mhm.
Paige?
It is my daughter and her friends and um I in my personal life, I'm highly involved with youth and different things like that. So I talk with a bunch of girls her age. So I'm pretty familiar with that target and even like a little bit older. So yeah, so that would be, so maybe it is YA. No, I'm kidding. But
I was going to say, well, and that was going to be my next question. Technically, is your ideal reader your future daughter? So your daughter
yes,
in the future, like 10 years down the
yes,
road from now. And that's
exactly. Yes.
sort of, yes. Okay. Okay.
Hmm.
And see, and I think that's, if you're going to, I'm going to put makeup in quotes, if you're going to make a person up, I think doing it that way is still very meaningful, even though you
Hmm.
don't know her 10 years from now. And we all know kids change and grow and morph, but you are telling a very personal story that ultimately you want the adult version of your daughter to read and appreciate and walk away from knowing more about life in general, right? And
Yes.
so, yes. I mean, I was writing a middle grade low fantasy and I wrote it for the neighbor kid. You're writing women's fiction, writing it for your daughter. I have the book that I am currently working on now. I am writing for my daughter, but I'm writing, well, for both of my daughters, and they are the right age, thankfully, to read YA. So I do get to turn around and be like, hey, 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 tell me what you would do here,
Hmm.
and it's so helpful. So if you're writing fantasy, if you're writing sci-fi, if you don't know who your ideal reader is, ask around. Certainly you have someone in your friend group who reads the types of things that you like to write and use them as the basis for an ideal reader character
Hmm.
and put it together, because ultimately you want to, this is the person you want to satisfy, and this is the person you want to find to get to buy your book and give you stellar
Yeah.
reviews, because you're
Well,
going to get
because
them.
I think I don't know if it's in here or not. And I'm not going to name it because I'm not going to be that person. But it's funny because there was a book that I started and it was really recommended by male friends. That's important.
Hmm. Okay.
But I could tell that, or my interpretation was that the characters that were created, their relationships and stuff were supposed to be for women, but it was a man doing it. Like you could just absolutely tell. I'm like, no woman is going to react like that. And I think that that is something, and I know that there's men that can absolutely
Right, a
create,
female perspective more genuinely and authentically than.
right. But as soon as I realized that, I closed it and set it to the side.
Mhm.
So,
We want to
yeah,
avoid that. So
exactly.
consider your ideal reader, people. That is our advice to you this week. And that is great advice, by the way, no matter where you are in the writing process. If you are mid first draft, you can think about this while you're taking your shower, or taking your walk, driving into work. Start noodling about your ideal reader. If you are revising, start thinking about your ideal reader. If you are just planning, like Brooke, start thinking about your ideal reader. Is going to ultimately make your job as a writer easier.
Hmm.
So, thank you for joining us, everyone, this week for First Novel Problems. Next week, we are going to start talking about something that I know is probably going to make at least half of our audience, if not 3/4, groan, and that's outlining. So even if you are a pantser, I promise you, I have information that will help you. So pantsers, plotters, everyone welcome. Join us next week right back here on First Novel Problems.